The Women's Euros kicked off a couple of days ago, and in today's video, I'm joined by my friend Flo to talk about the best teams at the competition. So let's have a look at Sweden to start with. And I think the most interesting thing about Sweden is just the flexibility they have in terms of the formations that they can play. So this is a recent formation that they played in the warm-up to the Euros. It's a sort of 3-5-2 formation. Asllani usually plays up front, but she sort of floated in this half space. She was pushing up in between the two strikers out of possession. So it looks a little bit more like a 3-4-3. But there's also the possibility that they could drop Anderson in here, push the centre-backs across, bring on Glass here, maybe bring in Angeldal in the central midfield space, and then you could even see Rolfo coming on the left-hand side, and this looking more like a 4-4-2. So it feels like they have just the most flexibility in terms of like all of the teams that we're going to talk about today. There's just so much depth there that they can flip things around. If they're playing against an opponent who struggles against a certain formation, they can come out and do different things against them. So yeah, thoughts on Sweden, and maybe highlight some of the players that you think are going to stand out in this tournament. Yeah, well, you've said it. It's the depth really that makes Sweden such an outstanding team, and they're so well balanced. They've got quality across the whole pitch. Hedvig Lindahl used to play at Chelsea and has won the Golden Glove and been one of the best goalkeepers in the world for a very long time. So they've got experience there. Magdalena Eriksson coming off a bit of a difficult season for Chelsea because she spent a bit of time out injured. It's not one of her better seasons for the club, but she is such a fantastic defender. And you know, she will be crucial for Sweden at this tournament. Jonna Andersson, similarly on the left-hand side, has struggled, recently left Chelsea and has struggled over the last couple of years to kind of break through and be a reliable option for Emma Hayes' side. But she does really thrive for Sweden. We saw her do very well at the Olympic Games last summer. But really, I think what is so impressive about Sweden is how creative they've become going forward, because I think in a very typical, stereotypical way, I think we've always known Sweden to be very organised, to be very dangerous from set pieces, but perhaps lacked creativity. And I think there was a lot of pressure on Asllani to deliver as the real central creative force for Sweden. But since the 2019 World Cup, we've seen a lot more creativity come through. They've got more players who can score and create from distance, but we've seen now their fullbacks really come into their own, and that's why Jonna Andersson's thrived, really. She's pushed up the pitch and been able to deliver crosses into Hurtig in the box, who plays for Juventus and is coming off the back of a pretty good season. And she's a real poacher, really. She's very good with scoring headers. She's very good at anticipating balls into the box, and she's a really reliable finisher. She's very good at kind of picking up scraps as well, picking up rebounds. Asllani's a bit more of a tricky player, a bit more of a runner, a bit more of a creator. And Rolfo, who has even spent time playing at left back for Barcelona this season, she's someone who really pushes up the field and is a tremendous player. So they're a bit of a total package, to be honest. So it's really the depth and it's the balance, and then it's that experience in recent tournaments. But at the same time, getting to finals and getting to semi-finals, they still are yet to win it. They last won the Euros in 1984. So they're a bit like England in the sense that kind of like always the bridesmaid, never the bride. And that defeat in the final at the Olympic Games on penalties to Canada hit them hard, because they went into that as favourites and it felt like this was going to be finally their moment to win that gold medal, and they couldn't get it done. So it'll be interesting to see, what they may have changed from kind of a mental point of view, mental preparation going into this tournament, because when you look at this team, you think they're really the total package. They recently came off the back of a really impressive turnaround. They were 1-0 down to Brazil in a friendly warm-up for this tournament in front of a sold-out crowd at the national team stadium in Stockholm. 30 minutes to go, they turned around and won 3-1 and was so aggressive. They had 20 shots on goal in the end. So they're just really, really impressive going forward, and that's been the real change maker. So let's move on to France. So France are a team who have been traditionally quite strong in the women's game, and obviously they deserve their place in this top 5 teams in the tournament. But you've mentioned to me that there's maybe a few off-field issues that have been going on recently with the French team. Yeah, I think it's important to give that context around this, because I think that probably will impact a lot of their chances of going deep into this tournament. Obviously, a lot of people will remember quite recently they hosted the Women's World Cup.
was a lot of expectation on their shoulders, and they very narrowly lost to the USA in the quarterfinals in Paris. And off the back of that tournament, lots of stuff came out about players being unhappy, about players struggling in that environment, about players being in tears after that tournament or spending most of the tournament in tears. And there's been a lot of controversy surrounding their head coach, Corinne Diacre. I think people were surprised to see her still stay after that World Cup disappointment. And she's not only stayed, but since then and during her tenure during the World Cup as well, she's made some very controversial decisions. Marie-Antoinette Katoto, who is one of their best players, such a good forward, such a good goal scorer, PSG's record goal scorer. She was left out of the squad for the World Cup. A lot of people were surprised about that. There's controversy there. There's off the field stuff going on, but you can't ignore how good they are, especially going forward, and the attacking players that they have at their disposal. Wendy Renard as well lost the captaincy for some time under Diacre, so I'll probably put the context of that there and park that for a little bit. But recently, France have thrived in some of their international fixtures, and in the warm-up to this tournament, it's been a pretty good couple of months. And like I said, the front three are probably the most exciting bit of this team. Katoto, very good at the press, very good at winning the ball in high areas, turning them over and turning that into goal scoring opportunities. She's had lots of success doing that for club and country. We also see Sandy Baltimore on the left-hand side, who also plays for PSG alongside Katoto. Really tricky winger, very small, very low centre of gravity. She likes to drive into the box. She's a handful, but she's also a tremendous finisher. She can score in and outside the box. She's brilliant. And who we don't have on the pitch now, because Cascarino tends to be the favoured right-hand side of that front three, is Diani, who also plays at PSG. So there's a potential for France to play with the whole front three from PSG, and obviously we know that when players spend time together at club, they know each other very well. There's a very good understanding when it comes to playing for their country. So that's an option that Diacre can look to. Very good going forward for France, and I think we're going to see some brilliant attacking play from them. Where their weakness is going to be is in this midfield. We've got no Armand Henry, and we've got a player like Kenza Dali, who is coming off the back of a pretty disappointing and frustrating season for Everton in the WSL. They invested heavily in the summer, and it hasn't gone to plan. But she tends to be the favoured midfielder in that position, and I think France are going to struggle to get a grip on games in that area, but I think what they're going to want to do is use the ball-playing ability of their defence and the long-range passing of their players to try and get the ball into the likes of Baltimore and Katoto and find that space in behind. And when you've got such phenomenal wingers like they have, you're going to be running the channels and taking on some pretty terrified fullbacks.
Yeah, and they've got a really great back line in terms of build-up play as well. So what we'll often see is France spreading their centre-backs across, dropping their centre midfielder in, pushing their full-backs up as well. And that just allows them to have overloads in this sort of area so they can build the ball up, use the goalkeeper as well, and then, as we've said, just get it down the line into the feet of these really exciting forwards. So yeah, France on paper have a really good team. So if you think that they can overcome those off-field issues, then do you think they could be in with a chance of being maybe slightly dark horses in that sense?
Yeah, they probably are the dark horses within our sort of horsey group of countries that we've selected, but they've got a fairly easy group compared to some of the other nations. They've got Italy, Belgium and Iceland in their group, and they're going to play probably, if they get through, one of Sweden, Netherlands, Portugal or Switzerland, depending when they finish. So they're not going to be in that group of death, and they're going to avoid that group of death, which is Group B. So I think that they could get a nice pathway to going deep in this tournament, and who knows what's going to happen with the off-the-field stuff, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about it once the tournament's over.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the group of death, so what better time than the present to get into it? So let's start off with talking about Germany. So Germany, again, another traditional team who've been very strong in women's game. Obviously, we've seen Wolfsburg go a long way in Champions Leagues in recent seasons as well. So yeah, that's a sort of fairly standard formation from them, 4-2-3-1 we've got here. Potential with a lot of these teams is to maybe mix around their central midfield space, but they've got Lena Oberdorf as one of the best defensive midfielders in the world, so she'll sit in front of the back four obviously, and they'll build the rest of the team in front of her. So Thoughts on Germany? You've said to me that you think maybe their defence is maybe the weak spot for them.
Yeah, so I should say they're in a group of death with Spain, Finland, and Denmark, which is a very tough group. They come into the tournament off the back of pretty good form. They played England, Spain, and Canada in the Arnold Clark Cup in England in February, March time, but they didn't have their full squad for that tournament, so we couldn't really get to grips with how they're going to play at the Euros because they lost a lot of their squad because of injury and COVID, whereas now they're pretty much at full strength bar the absence of Jennifer Marijan, who's out with a knee injury. So I think their chances are looking really good. They've got very good attacking players, a really solid midfield, but like I say, yeah, the defence is probably the weakest situation for Germany at the moment because they're very susceptible to balls over the top. They struggle with their back towards goal one-on-one situations as well. And I think we've seen teams exploit them recently. They lost to Serbia 3-2 in a World Cup qualifier, not really a game you'd expect them to lose. And two of the goals that they conceded in that game just came from really simple balls over the top. Play a fairly high line because obviously they're going to have more in the ball in those games and would expect to. And Serbia just hit them on the break, ball over the top, and the two centre-backs really did struggle. And they're not the most physical defenders either. They get pushed off the ball quite easily, but also they struggle a little bit when they've got players running at them, especially on this wing. Rauch, I think, is a bit of a weak link for them. So that right-hand side, I think, attacking out route could be an issue for them because 1v1 they're a little bit weak as well.
Jule Brand, we need to talk about Jule Brand. She's an exciting wide player. So is she going to be the sort of the danger person for this Germany team? I
think so, yeah. She's still pretty young. She recently just got a move from Hoffenheim to Wolfsburg, who are such a powerhouse in German football, comes off a really good season, caused lots of problems for Arsenal in their Champions League group stages this season and was in that group with Hoffenheim. So I think it's going to be Brand and Magul who are going to be the really big players for Germany in this Euros. Both of them have been very successful in the warm-up games. Magul scored against England in the Arnold Clark Cup and she looks to be carrying on that form into this tournament. So I think they are going to be the stars. Brand is a fantastic winger, and Magul kind of does everything. She's very good at set pieces, but she likes to get in the box and score as well. I think she wants to carry this team, and I think that it's a good time for her to step up and do that. But they've also got a lot of good attacking talent on the bench as well. And I think this is a team that has nearly everything, just perhaps not as solid as Sweden and England in defence.
So do you think that they could again surprise people if they have a good route through? I mean, you've said they're already in the group of death, so I suppose they would have to have a good start to the tournament.
Yeah, they've got to hit the ground running because I think if they don't, then they could be out of that group. If Denmark, who have one of the best players in the world in Pernille Harder, if they don't get good results in those two games, they're not even going to get out of the group. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens to them. But at the same time, if they hit good form, that's going to be worrying for some of the other teams who want to win this competition.
So another team in the group of death is the final team that we're going to look at, and that is Spain. And we've talked already about how Spain are quite exciting on the world stage at the moment because we've seen the Barcelona-Real Madrid rivalry really sort of stoking up. They had that really highly attended game recently as well. And this is a team that when you talk about Barcelona, there's just a lot of hallmarks of the way that Barcelona play, right? So again, we're going to see fullbacks pushing up, lots of short passing, lots of build-up play as well. You're going to see these sorts of triangles forming on both sides as they look to overload the ball, get it into the box. Alexia Putellas, one of the best players in the world, if not the best player in the world right now. So yeah, talk to us a little bit about Spain. It must be quite exciting going into a tournament, not really knowing what to expect from them and having the expectation that they could actually be quite good.
Yeah, there's not two schools of thought, but I think there's a bit of a clash or a bit of a fight between how much will they fulfill some of the narrative around them being potentially talked about as one of the favourites for this competition, and also the reality that they aren't Barcelona. And I think they don't have as much versatility to their play as Barcelona do because we've become so accustomed to the Spanish identity of how to play football. And, you know, it's been talked about now for decades because they created a style of play which is really successful. But just like we saw with Pep Guardiola's Barcelona, there often isn't a plan B for these things, right? I think where Barcelona women have been so successful is they're so versatile because they can go direct and really challenge teams in the air, put balls in behind, and they don't rely so much on keeping the ball in possession. I don't think we see as much of that with Spain. I think they still are very traditionally Spanish in the way that they play, press very aggressively. Putellas is one of the best at that. They press in 2s and 3s, they swarm the ball, they give teams absolutely no time. But when they don't have the ball, I think it is hard for them to work out how to change those situations quite quickly and then find a route out and find opportunities like Barcelona do so successfully. There's also, not as controversially as say France, but there's also been some interesting selection choices from their manager Jorge Vilda. He's been in post since 2015. But he tends to lean towards playing older players, and there's been frustration from fans and a lot of people with inside Spanish football with his reluctancy to pick some of the younger players. So Ama Sarriegi, she's not even been selected for this squad, but she's had a really good season for Real Sociedad. She's played in some of the friendlies, she's played for Spain recently, but she didn't even make the squad. Now they've lost Jenny Hermoso, plays for Barcelona, or just left Barcelona actually, to head to play in Mexico. They've lost her because of injury. So Sarriegi, many people expected her to come in. There was another player that dropped out the squad. She still hasn't made it into the squad. So it's going to be interesting what they do there, because it looks like they're going to probably look for Esther Gonzalez playing in the central attacking position. And without Hermoso and without that kind of traditional target opportunity, Gonzalez is still a good player. She's 29, she's experienced. But I think that's going to be where Spain might fall down a little, because they haven't necessarily got the goal scorers in their team. They've got a lot of creativity, they've got fantastic ball players, they've got good fullbacks. Onabache, Manchester United, very good fullback. But it's that finishing product that I think they're going to lack. One of the players as well who's got a big reputation at the moment is Athenia Del Castillo, who was the player of the tournament in the Arnold Clark Cup. And she's a fantastic winger, really hard to defend. She took on Lucy Bronze in England's game against Spain in the Arnold Clark Cup. And she's definitely going to be one to watch. But I think it is going to be the issue at the top of the pitch that is one that Spain are going to have to solve. And the fact that Vilda is taking a little bit of criticism for his selection decisions, that could come back to bite him in the end, with so much pressure and expectation on this team to do well.
So those are the best teams at the Women's Euros 2022. Make sure you keep following the channel. We're going to have loads of great coverage across the whole competition.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and Rafa Honigstein. There are journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.